Good morning, Keegan.
Good morning, day shift TSO. You've all been chosen to spend your Christmas Eve here with 200,000 impatient travelers.
Is this because I'm Muslim? Is this because I'm black?
Is this because I'm white?
Airports turn.
There's something uniquely tense about stories set in airports, especially during the holidays, when everything is supposed to feel warm, joyful, and safe. That contrast is exactly what makes this film so gripping from the very beginning. It drops us into a world that feels familiar: crowded terminals, last-minute travelers, the hum of announcements overhead, but slowly twists that familiarity into something unsettling. At the center of it all is a young TSA agent, someone whose job is usually routine, procedural, and often overlooked. But here, that ordinary role becomes the foundation for a high-stakes psychological battle that unfolds in real time. The story builds around this agent who isn't presented as a flawless hero, but rather as someone grounded and human. He's dealing with the everyday pressures of life, career expectations, and personal relationships. That relatability is important because it makes everything that follows feel more immediate and more intense. When things begin to go wrong, they don't just happen to a movie character, they happen to someone who feels like he could be anyone. And that's where the tension really starts to sink in. It all begins on Christmas Eve, a setting that instantly raises the emotional stakes. Airports are already chaotic during the holidays, and the film leans into that chaos. There's a sense of urgency everywhere. People rushing to catch flights, families trying to reunite, employees stretched thin. Amid all this, the TSA agent is just trying to get through his shift. But then something unusual happens. A seemingly random interaction sets off a chain reaction that quickly spirals out of control. Enter the mysterious traveler. This character is where the film truly shifts gears. There's something calculated and controlled about him from the moment he appears. He doesn't rely on brute force or loud threats. Instead, he operates with precision, using psychological manipulation as his primary weapon. What makes him so effective and so terrifying is how calm he remains throughout. He doesn't need to raise his voice because he already holds all the leverage. The central conflict emerges when the agent is blackmailed into allowing a dangerous package to pass through security. And this isn't a simple one-time decision. It becomes an ongoing dilemma that traps him in a moral and psychological vice. Every second counts, and every choice carries consequences. The film doesn't just focus on what he does, it explores how he thinks, how he hesitates, and how he tries to outmaneuver someone who always seems one step ahead. One of the most compelling aspects of the story is how it turns a controlled environment into a battleground. Airports are designed for surveillance and security, with cameras everywhere and protocols for everything. Yet, the film shows how those same systems can be exploited. The agent is surrounded by colleagues, supervisors, and technology, but he's essentially alone in his struggle. He can't simply ask for help without risking everything, and that isolation becomes one of the film's most powerful tools. As the situation escalates, the narrative begins to weave together multiple layers of tension. There's the immediate threat of the package itself, which carries unknown but clearly dangerous implications. There's the psychological pressure exerted by the traveler, who seems to anticipate every move. And then there's the internal conflict within the agent, who is constantly weighing his options, trying to find a way out without causing harm. The pacing plays a crucial role here. Instead of relying solely on action sequences, the film builds suspense through timing and restraint. Moments of silence become just as important as moments of confrontation. A glance, a pause, a subtle shift in tone, these are the details that keep the audience on edge. You're not just watching events unfold, you're actively trying to predict what will happen next, often second-guessing yourself in the process. What also stands out is how the film uses its supporting characters. They aren't just background figures, they add depth to the story and increase the stakes. Coworkers, passengers, and even brief interactions all contribute to the sense that this is a living, breathing environment. At any moment, someone could unknowingly become part of the crisis, which adds another layer of tension. The agent isn't just trying to protect himself, He's trying to prevent a disaster that could affect countless lives. The relationship between the agent and the traveler is essentially a game of chess. Every move is calculated, every response carefully measured. The traveler's advantage lies in his ability to control the narrative, to dictate the terms of the conflict. But the agent isn't powerless. As the story progresses, you begin to see him adapt, think more strategically, and look for cracks in the situation. That evolution is key because it transforms him from a passive participant into an active player in the game. There's also an interesting exploration of morality throughout the film. The agent is forced into a situation where there are no easy answers. Do you comply and potentially enable something catastrophic, or do you resist and risk immediate consequences? The film doesn't offer simple solutions, and that ambiguity makes it more engaging. It forces the audience to consider what they would do in a similar situation, which is never a comfortable question. Visually, the setting plays a major role in maintaining the film's intensity. The airport, with its bright lights and open spaces, contrasts sharply with the dark undertones of the story. There's nowhere to hide, yet everything feels claustrophobic. The constant movement of people adds to the pressure, creating a sense that time is always slipping away. Every ticking second feels significant, and that urgency drives the narrative forward. As the plot unfolds, the stakes continue to rise. The agent's attempts to outsmart the traveler become more daring, more desperate. There are moments where it seems like he might gain the upper hand, only for the situation to shift again. That unpredictability is one of the film's strengths. It keeps you engaged, constantly reevaluating what you think you know. The traveler, meanwhile, remains an enigmatic presence. His motivations aren't immediately clear, which adds to the intrigue. He's not just a villain in the traditional sense. He's a strategist, someone who thrives on control and manipulation. The film gradually reveals more about him, but never enough to fully demystify his character. That restraint makes him more compelling because he always feels slightly out of reach. Another key element is how the film handles technology. In a modern airport, everything is monitored and recorded, yet that doesn't guarantee safety. The story highlights how systems designed to protect can also be used against those who rely on them. This adds a layer of realism, making the situation feel plausible rather than purely fictional. Emotionally, the film doesn't lose sight of its core. Amid all the tension and suspense, there's a human story at its center. The agent's personal life, his relationships, and his sense of responsibility all play a role in shaping his decisions. These elements ground the narrative, preventing it from becoming purely mechanical or plot-driven. As things move toward the climax, the pacing tightens even further. The sense of urgency becomes almost overwhelming, with multiple threads converging at once. The agent is pushed to his limits, forced to make choices that will define the outcome. It's in these moments that the film truly delivers on its premise, combining psychological conflict with high-stakes drama. What makes the resolution satisfying is not just the outcome, but the journey it takes to get there. The film earns its ending by carefully building every step along the way. It doesn't rely on sudden twists for shock value. Instead, it develops its narrative in a way that feels coherent and intentional. In the end, what you're left with is a story that's as much about human resilience as it is about suspense. It takes a familiar setting and transforms it into something unpredictable and intense, using character-driven storytelling to elevate the stakes. The combination of psychological conflict, moral dilemmas, and a tightly controlled environment creates an experience that stays with you even after it's over. It's the kind of film that keeps you thinking, not just about what happened, but how easily things could have gone differently. And that lingering sense of possibility, of what might have been, is what gives it its lasting impact.